Issa. Okay. Issa?
Yes.
Asa Galloway.
Issa Galloway defines the mission.
Kind of a show that will put people on the edge of their seat.
Because it leads to the future, the more sophisticated approach.
What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the show. Today, I am having a distinct pleasure of interviewing a friend who is also a teacher of mine. His name is Imam Anwar Arafat. He is a Memphis-based Imam from the Salt Lake City area and has a unique history, started memorizing Quran in Gaza City, Gaza, Palestine. And we have so much amazing stuff to talk about today. So without further ado, I am bringing him on right now. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are
How's
you
it going today?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, I'm doing well. Thanks for asking.
Nice seeing you. Yeah.
I called you this morning and you were at a church. What's up? What's going on?
Yeah, I know. That's a random thing. You're like, the Imam is calling from a church? What? No, so we, with SNAP benefits being cut off, there's a church that's like 3 minutes away from our house. And I've known the pastor there for a long time. We worked together on like the COVID task force, the interfaith COVID task force. And, hearing about what they've been having to do. So their pantry's been open for a very long time. And not only because of the cutoff SNAP benefits, but also because of ICE and the National Guard being in Memphis, they've had a lot of demand and pressure. And they said, I was in a meeting and they said, we need volunteers. And I was like, I can come. I'm 3 minutes away. There's no reason why I can't. And honestly, I'll tell you this, it's excellent dawah. Because a lot of times we think of dawah to be, I'm going to go set up a table and I'm going to teach these people about Islam. And that's, honestly, your actions, wallahi, just me and my wife showing up. So my wife shows up in hijab and I'm there and I'm introducing my name and they're Anwar, oh, you're an Imam? Oh, wow, that's amazing, So even the church goers, the other volunteers that are there, their minds are like, their whole universe is expanding because the last thing that they would have ever thought of would be like a Muslim coming to volunteer at a church. And vice versa. So and I'm not even so I'll tell you this, it's not even active dawah. At least two of them already asked if they could come to a Friday service. And then there's a third that's like thinking about it.
Nice.
And I didn't even offer it. Like, you know what I mean? They came and they said, oh, how could I come to y'all's mosque? Where's this? And it wasn't even the one that I mainly go to, right? If one of the guys lives in Midtown, he's like, can I go to the Midtown one? And I said, absolutely. I can put you in touch with the Imam there. So, I mean, that by itself, just putting ourselves out there sometimes, in these unexpected ways. So.
Well, the thing is, you're actually preempting my first question is how do you define dawah? And so just so you know, when you speak for my audience, it's mixed, mostly Muslim community. I'm a little proud to say a lot of thought leaders in the Muslim community. People reach out to me that are in positions that run different organizations and stuff, which is very cool. But I get a lot of non-Muslims also. So people curious about how our community thinks. So back to the question, how do you define dawah with that audience in mind?
Yeah, so da'wah, right? The linguistic meaning is, of course, invitation. But if you look, and that means, so obviously we don't convert anybody. And I do that in my da'wah class that I teach. There's a lot of Muslims that are under that impression. Obviously, a ton of non-Muslims that are under that impression. We don't convert anyone, right? Guidance is from God. We show you what we have. You like it, ahlan wa sahlan, welcome. If you don't like it, ahlan wa sahlan, you're still welcome. Muslims have been living side by side, with Jews and Christians for so many years, right? In fact, it was Muslims who took care of a lot of the places of worship for the non-Muslims, right? Muslims still have the keys to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is arguably the holiest site of Christianity. It's a Muslim family that's been running it. And Muslim families will continue to run it. It's not like we're doing it because we're all in this together, at the end of the day. Mm. So going back, da'wah, I take, there's a verse that I think spells out da'wah perfectly, right? I love this idea of Quranic da'wah. So the verse says, وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِّمَّنْ دَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ وعمل صالحا وقال إنني من المسلمين. Who is better in speech than the one who calls, invites, da'a ila Allah, invites to Allah, and does righteous deeds, does good, and says, I am of the Muslims. So the verse is out of order. So I tell people, because it goes from best to least best, right? So the
Yeah.
ideal to the, so then we start with the back. So what's the first step in da'wah is to just say, I'm a Muslim, right? That's how you start da'wah, because they don't know that you're Muslim. Then how am I supposed to actually, like, if I open up a charity and I say, Memphis United Charities, and nobody knows that actually Muslims are behind it, is the perception of Islam and Muslims going to change? No, nobody, unless they actively know and they come. But when I put it out there, hey, by the way, I'm Muslim, right? And I'm motivated by my faith to do these acts of charity, that speaks for itself. I don't have to actively be proselytizing or telling people, we're not about that. We're about, here's what we have, here's who we are. God tells us to do good, I'm doing good. You know what I mean? And so he says that he's of the Muslims, right? And then he says, and then he does righteous deeds, and then he invites. So we usually jump to the invite part. We set up the table and we're telling everybody about Islam, but we haven't done the first part, which is just representing ourselves as good Muslims or actually doing good in the community. One of the sad realities is this church right now that's set up, they have their pantry every Thursday. And it's kind of under the radar, right? On purpose, because they don't want unwanted attention, especially like with the National Guard, ICE, etc. A lot of the recipients of the charity that they were getting, are actually Hispanic, right? And families, probably undocumented, probably needing some support otherwise. So they like it that way. So that way they're not getting that unwanted attention. So this church is doing amazing work. If this church disappeared tomorrow, a lot of people would miss it. The churchgoers, of course, but the neighbors that are benefiting, the people that are receiving, these good things that they get. What about our mosques? Like, if our masjid disappeared tomorrow, would anybody miss us? Or would it be, God forbid, the opposite? Like, people would breathe a sigh of relief, which is terrible to think about. But there's so many, I know I can think of so many masajid, sadly, where that would be the case, where the neighbors would be like, finally that mosque is gone. We don't have parking issues anymore, the noise, the nuisance, the sound. We had people complaining because, like, there would be Muslims, unfortunately, you know what I mean? We're not perfect. There would be smokers, and their smoking area was right next to, like, the neighbors. And so the only thing that they knew about the Muslims was that they would hang out over here and smoke near our, and it's like, guys, like, what are we doing? You know what I mean? Like,
way to live up to like the Arab comedians. There's one guy on TikTok. He's always joking where he's on the treadmill smoking, like he's riding and puffing at the same time.
Bro, I saw statistics that showed that smoking is on the decline everywhere in the world, except for the Middle East and Muslim predominant countries. It's on the rise still. And they're like, guys, did nobody get the memo? Did we not get, like, what are we? It's mind-boggling. So,
alhamdulillah, thanks for defining dawah. And I also noticed you said something, you said active dawah, right? I tend to look at like civics as pre-dawah, like showing up, showing that you care. So for instance, like parents at a school board meeting, especially hijabi sisters or a brother with a big beard. People then just realize that you're actually engaged when you show up. And I call that pre-dawah because for me, it's like I'm at a point where, like my own personal story, I read Ahmadidat's book, both of them, The Choice, 1 and 2. And I came up with a Christian counter argument for every point he made, but I found that they didn't all jive together, right? Each counter argument necessarily didn't work with the others.
Yeah.
But what really led me to Islam is the concept of Tawheed, right? And I'd known Muslims forever. I'd seen good ones, bad ones. It didn't matter. Like for me, it was just like, God's one, either I'm going to be a hypocrite or not. So I think pre-dawah is kind of slept on, or maybe non-active dawah. What do you think?
Yeah, passive. Yeah, we do divide dawah into like active versus passive. Passive is your character, who you are, your identity. Just you being a good Muslim is sometimes good dawah, but it's passive because you're not actively participating, right? Engaging in actually sharing the message of Islam. Whereas active dawah, you're actively sharing it. So there's a misconception that I have to be on active dawah 24/7. You don't, right? In fact, I would argue you shouldn't, unless you know what you're doing, because sometimes you can do more damage than good, right? So you got to be very careful with that, with turning on the active dawah switch. But your passive dawah game should be excellent. And that's because of the excellence of who you are as a Muslim. So like you said, you're civically engaged. You're going to the school board meeting. You're engaging with your neighbors. You're talking to your coworkers, your colleagues, just being that upright, good Muslim. And they know that you're Muslim. Remember, like a lot of times you have, the Muhammad becoming Mo and the Bilal becoming Bill, and nobody knows that they're Muslim. But you're still upright, you're still good. Those are lost opportunities. And a person might say, well, I'm not a perfect person. I am sinful. I have all these mistakes. So I don't want people to then taint Islam with who I am as a person. And that's incorrect. That's not the right way of thinking, because we're all human beings. If we say that only perfect people can be Muslim, then we're in trouble, because that doesn't exist. That's not who a Muslim is anyways. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't expect that. In fact, in the verses that talk about taqwa, like taqwa is the highest level of righteousness that you can attain, right? It says, وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً أَوْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُم. And the ones who, when they commit a mistake, فَعَلُوا فَاحِشَةً, like a vulgar deed, أَوْ ظَلَمُوا, or they wrong themselves, ذَكَرُوا اللَّهَ فَاسْتَغْفَرُوا لِذُنُوبِهِم. They remember Allah and they ask for forgiveness. So it's saying, like, you can be a muttaqi and still make mistakes. Allah doesn't expect you to be perfect. He wants you to aim for perfection, but He knows that you're going to fall short. And you also have to be merciful with yourself to know that you will fall short, which means that even with your human imperfection, you can still portray yourself as a Muslim. Right?
I wanted to ask you about two things with that. One, we'll do that question later, but I think there's a phrase in like Christian society and in Christianity that Muslims have, and we have the concept, but we don't employ it enough. It's grace. Being able to, right? So what would that phrase in the Islamic vernacular, and how would you explain it to Muslims?
Rahma. I think it's rahma.
Okay.
Right? It's being merciful to yourself. I could be wrong in this. I think it's
mercy is
being
never
merciful.
a bad thing, right?
Mercy is never a bad thing, wallah. Mercy, kindness, never a bad thing. But mercy extends, like, Ar-Rahimun yarhamuhumullah, or yarhamuhum ar-Rahman. It says the people who have mercy, the most merciful will have mercy to them, right? And then the Prophet says, Irhamu man fil ardi yarhamukum man fis sama. Have mercy upon the ones in the earth, and the one who's in the heavens will have mercy upon you. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His mercy. So when we behave in such a way, this is kind of from that mindset of, it's not just what you do, like what goes around comes around. As you do to others, so will be done to you. But it's as you do to others, Allah will do to you. Okay? So if I'm merciful, accommodating, forgiving, I accept people's excuses, I'm not, overbearing, I'm not harsh, then my hope is Allah will deal with me in a similar way. It has to be genuine. It can't just be a claim. So when it's genuine, absolutely. And I think we see that, inshallah ta'ala, a lot of times. You'll see that the people that are most merciful, Allah will be merciful to them. Unfortunately, you do have people that are like merciful publicly, but privately very harsh, meaning on their wife and their kids and their family members. You can't be that person either. Like, you'll see like a lot of time, a lady will come, my husband, he's abusive, whatever. And I'm like, who's your husband? And that brother, wait, I know that brother. He's so nice at the message. She's like, yeah, he's a sheep, he's a wolf in sheep's clothes, I'm like, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. What happened? But you do have, unfortunately, it happens. You'll have the nicest, calmest, like miskeen. You'll think that this guy like can't hurt a fly, and then it turns out. So mercy, the most deserving of your mercy is your family.
Well,
right?
and I love
and then those around you.
when you mentioned that's so important. I mean, and lessons for all of us to renew ourselves too, because like what I love though is that when I was talking about grace, most people in society use it as like being forgivable, being forgiving of people and how they harm you. But I love how you tied it to Tawheed and you tied it to the relationship with God first, because I think what a lot of people don't understand, and the reason I wanted to talk to you today is I feel like we're at a moment that, it's kind of the tale of two cities. Like, twas the best of times, twas the worst of times, right? You've got you've got all these Muslim politicians winning. You got Mamdani. You have, a pretty good show out for Omar Fateh in Minnesota. You got all of these things happening. And it's like proof that the Muslim identity is not a hindrance for people to be successful,
Yes.
right? And then at the same time, you have the backlash of just, unbridled ugliness of just anti-Muslim hatred and fear mongering. And so, like, my thought is mental jujitsu, it's time to step up Dawah. They're telling us we're trying to take over. And I'm like, yeah, let's live our values out loud to everyone.
Yeah.
You got thoughts
Yeah.
about that?
We shouldn't 100%. Oh, I'm with you 100%. The days of Islamophobia being a selling point or something that can win you political points is gone, hopefully. I mean, they'll still try to bring it up and
From
here
the
and there
lips of
for sure.
Mandani's speech, right? He said that in his acceptance
Oh,
speech.
yeah, 100%. When they try to, fear monger, and the thing is, in New York, that will not work. Maybe in rural Tennessee, right? It
Yeah.
might work but you know why it works here and it doesn't work in New York. In New York, people know Muslims. There's 1 million Muslims living in New York. So all the New Yorkers are like, what are you talking about? My bodega owner is a Muslim. My neighbor is a Muslim. My coworkers are Muslim. These are all wonderful people. Like, what are you guys talking about when you say, like, when you're film mongering that these are terrorists? These are not terrorists. We don't see this, right? A person who's never met a Muslim in his life is sitting on his couch watching Fox News. He's gonna be like, yeah, they're Muslims, they're terrorists, they're but it's because he's never met a Muslim. And so we have to step up as Muslims and be the one that they meet and they greet and they get to know. Like I'm telling you, and I'm not saying that everybody has to go out and volunteer at a church, but what I'm saying is when we're
Why
afraid
not
of
though?
of I mean, yeah, I mean, if you feel comfortable, Bismillah, why not, we need to we're not putting ourselves out there, like you said. And the more we do it, the easier it will be on everyone else. I tell this to sisters about hijab as well. The more sisters that wear hijab, the more they make it easy on all of the sisters that wear hijab. Does that make sense? So it's not a so we have an individual decision to make, like for me, if I'm comfortable wearing it or not. But also I have to realize that me wearing it, I'm contributing to everyone else's safety as well and acceptance as well. That our decisions have a communal aspect and we don't kind of sometimes think about that. So when I come and I'm like, I don't want to bother my neighbors, I'm not going to talk to them, they're not going to talk to me. You now have put yourself in that comfortable bubble, but you're affecting a whole community without even realizing it. And the opposite is true. We think that our actions only affect us. So in Dawah, this is very important. Think about how many people were turned away from Islam when they dealt with a Muslim who wasn't upright, who lied and cheated and stole and did all these other things. And how many people were turned on to Islam because they dealt with a Muslim who was upright, who was excellent, who didn't cheat, who showed them exactly what they needed. There's so many stories like this. One of the saddest stories there's a sister, alhamdulillah, she's Muslim now. She lived, I don't want to say the name of the city, right? Because I'm sure that there's wonderful viewers from that city. But it's a city that has almost maybe a majority Muslim population. Okay. She said, I grew up there. I had Muslim friends all over. Okay. It never occurred to her. She grew up there, right? Until like high school, college. It never occurred to her that Islam was something that she could actually adopt as a way of life until she moved to Memphis, Tennessee, and met other Muslims here. And then they taught her like about Islam. She's like, "What? This is something I can be? Like I thought it was only for like people from this country or that country. Like it's not a." She thought it was an ethnic thing, not a. And she grew up around Muslims, but nobody had. And she's like, even a lot of the Muslims that I know were just like they weren't good people, and that's her being polite. That's literally what she said. She said they weren't. And it wasn't until she came to Memphis, and alhamdulillah, she got married to a Muslim guy. they're doing great, alhamdulillah. But that's kind of the idea, is that um, the way that we behave, we think that our behavior only affects us. And the reality is it has repercussions for the whole community, whether we realize it or not. And and that's essential to dawah. It's not a side thing. It's a core, because when people see who you are, they're going to change their perception. So that guy who has the bad, like going back to Mamdani, so many Jews, right? So many Christians, so many atheists, whoever, you had him, you had him campaigning in nightclubs, right? And some of them
Yeah.
were gay nightclubs,
Mhm.
and they're voting for him because they see who he is as a person. People want authenticity from their elected officials. They don't want platitudes. They want something solid, and you can tell that the person is genuine, sincere, right? Mamdani, that's what we've lacked in our politicians for so long. It has nothing to do with him being a democratic socialist, right? It has everything to do with him sticking to his guns and telling people exactly who he is, what he believes in, and that's it. Authenticity is the name of the game. And when we lack that authenticity, we that's what we want. And we have to be comfortable putting ourselves out there. If we can reach out to our neighbors, what's the worst thing that they're gonna do, right? You bring some nice, like, kanafa or baklawa or whatever. You can make cookies, right? You can say, like, I'm Muslim and I make cookies too, and share them with your neighbor. It doesn't have to be something exotic. And just tell them, like, but they'll see you, like, oh, what's your name? Oh, where's that name from? Oh, yeah, I'm Muslim. Oh, okay, interesting. Now their whole world is going to change, because when he sees, Cuomo or Eric Adams lying about Muslims being terrorists, and then he sees you, Muhammad or Ahmed or Anwar or Isa, and it's like, man, I know these people. They're not what they're saying on TV. They won't buy it anymore. And that product will cease to sale. So what I'm saying is, we have a bigger part to play in all of this. We put it on politicians, on CARE, on all these big organizations to fight Islamophobia, where we, the common Muslims, should be at the front lines of this battle.
Well, and I think there's an important underlying thing here too, because earlier you said we don't convert anyone. And I want the
Yeah.
non-Muslims watching this to really understand that our community, our faith teaches us our job is to let people know what our faith is,
Yeah.
but we can't make anyone accept it. In fact,
No.
like there's the verses, you can't, there's no compulsion in religion, and on and on. I mean, the thing about it is, like, they craft this narrative, and I think it's really reflective of not just hypocritical, but like really cowardly or insecure thinking that less than 2% of the society can somehow like force, the majority of the society into something they don't want. Like,
Yeah.
have you thought about that before?
Yeah. It's a crazy argument when you break it down, and it doesn't make any sense. Oh, they want to force Sharia law on everybody. Like, first off, Muslims can't even force their own kids on Sharia law, right? Like, we're struggling to get them to pray.
Yeah.
Sharia law is not this boogeyman. It just means following, the teachings that Islam has. It's been made into a boogeyman because they use the Arabic term and not like an English term. So if they said, like, Islamic jurisprudence, right, or legislation or Islamic teachings instead of Sharia law, people would be like, "Oh, okay, interesting."
You know what I
When it
love?
says when,
Did you watch?
yeah,
I know you're an anime fan. Do you watch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse?
yes,
The
uh
animated. Did you see the one where they had the Indian Spider-Man?
yeah,
Do you remember the scene where he goes, "Why do people keep saying chai tea? It's like saying TT, right?"
TT, yeah,
When
exactly, yeah.
people say Sharia law, I'm like, law, law. It's like,
La
what?
La, yeah, it is. It is La La, La La Land. So they, yeah, 100%. Or like Panera bread. The word Panera is bread in
Yeah,
Italian, or whatever. It's like bread. So you got all these, big problems. When we use these exotic terms, we're making it seem like it's fancier than it really is. It's
exactly.
just bread. It's just tea, right? It's just laws, regulations, guidelines for us as Muslims, right?
Mm.
Plus there's built in, it's funny, they were saying, like, some of the complaints, that the West had, um, when dealing with Muslims was, so, like, 150 years ago, 200 years ago, during colonial times, the complaint was the opposite, that Sharia law was too flexible and too accommodating to people, and therefore we need to actually codify it, because we don't like it that any Muslim can go up to an imam and ask him a question and he'll give him a religious ruling, right? We don't like that. It has to be, yeah. The whole idea, so, and this is a little controversial, a lot of Muslims don't know this. The whole idea of having a grand mufti of a country is a Western phenomenon. It's not an Islamic phenomenon. We never had that during any of the empires, the Umayyads, the Abbasids, the Mamluks, the whoever. There was never a grand mufti, right, who stood above all other muftis. That was a colonial thing, to kind of control the rhetoric around religious rulings. Again, because the West saw Islamic law, ironically, as too flexible and too accommodating, compared to like common British law. So fast forward to now, they flipped the script, right? Remember, like there's this beautiful rule, and it's proved time and time again, which is every accusation is an admission.
Confession. Yeah.
It's a confession, right? Every time. So when they say, oh, Islamic law is so old and archaic and rigid, and it's not, number one, but they're saying it's actually them. Because it is. Well, we have laws in this country, like Trump is applying this rule that's, 1858, on some whatever random stuff. You saw this. It happened in the news a few times. And you're just like, really, guys? This is what we're doing now? So,
well, and that's the
with that
difference
said,
between engineering an outcome versus looking for the truth.
Oh yeah. Fatwa shopping, and unfortunately Muslims do that as well. Well, I already know what I want, and I'm just going to find the way to get it through, finagling the rulings and stuff. So we have to be careful there as well. So, alhamdulillah.
So, to meet the moment, the best of times and the worst of times all at once, I think a lot of Muslims have become very comfortable because, they're in the routines, they have their work life, they have their home life. And it's almost like you have a schizophrenic personality. You go to work, you're in the cog, you're, doing the machine. And then when you get home, you're probably a little more Muslim. And then at the masjid, you're like hyper religious. I feel like we have a kind of a tri-personality. Like, we lower our gaze at the masjid. At work, we're a normal American. And then, at home, it's kind of somewhere in between because of the things we watch and stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
How do you think, with all,
I remember there was that whole movement of Muslims like pretending not to watch like popular shows like Game of Thrones or something.
Yeah.
Because they don't want people thinking that they're watching stuff with like bad content. So everybody's pretending Game of Thrones, what's that? I've never heard of it before, like.
And the thing with Game of Thrones in particular is you never know when they're going to flash something up there you need to fast forward through. It's like, it's almost like they are unpredictable on it on purpose,
Yeah.
But
I mean, even for a non-Muslim audience, it was too much, like forget
right?
Muslims. It was like, but yeah.
I'm a bit of a cinephile, so it makes me think of Fight Club and how there were specific scenes about that with unintended or hidden messaging. But anyway,
it's old school.
Yeah, that is pretty old. But Edward Norton and Brad Pitt, peak actors, I think, both of them.
Yes.
So not that I'm gonna get you accused of being, normalizing bad stuff in the media, subhanAllah. Apologies. That's all on me and my proclivities.
I haven't said anything. I haven't said that I've watched any of these things. I have no idea what we're talking about.
No, but honestly, this is actually proof to my point about being one person all the time, right? Like,
yeah.
I feel like
consistency. We're almost schizophrenic, right? Not to use the term loosely, but yeah, we are. And I think worse than all of that, well, not worse, but along with that same problem is that we put ourselves in this bubble, right? That we're not willing to kind of go outside of it. Meaning a lot of people have that mindset. Okay, I'm in America, especially like the immigrant generation, the generations of our parents, etc. I'm going to go to America. I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to go, to my work. I'm going to go home. I'm going to go to the grocery store. I'm going to go to the masjid. And that's it. I'm not going to go anywhere else. I'm not going to bother anybody. Nobody's going to bother me. I'm not going to explore the country. I'm not going to learn anything about it. I don't care. I just want to make enough money, take care of my kids, set them up for a nice future, and then mass salama, done deal. We're discovering the hard way that that's not the right way to do things. That's not the right way. That's not what even our religion tells us to do.
Right.
Right, to be good stewards of the earth, to take care of your neighbors, to be out there. Just because I live here, and this comes from, there was that wave of immigrants that came in between the 1880s and 1920s, right? About 40 years of immigration, where a lot of them came from the Levant, even Palestine, Syria, Turkey, Albania. A lot of these Muslims who could pass as white.
Yep.
Okay,
Casey
they
Kasem.
came to America. And
Do you know who that is?
they
Casey Kasem?
no.
Oh, so he used to run a top 40 music show. His name was Casey Kasem. I think he was Lebanese,
Oh
and
yeah,
he
yeah,
just
okay.
became white. But I'm sorry, I interrupted
Yeah.
you.
There's a ton. I mean, there's a ton of those cases, right?
Mhm.
And they came. So their parents came. Like, well, I mean, a lot of those people came, and a lot of them actually had the mindset of, I'm going to work hard enough to save up enough money to take it back home. And about 50% of them did. 50% of those immigrants actually went back to their countries of origin, but 50% stayed in the country. And of those 50%, a lot of them got married. A bunch of them brought like a wife. They would go back home, bring a wife, bring her here. A bunch of them got married to local girls here as well. But that idea that I'm never putting myself out there, I'm just going to put my head down and work hard, those days are gone. I mean, you should still work hard, but you need to engage with broader society. You can't live in a bubble. We don't live in bubbles anymore. And if you have that mindset, your kids are way out of the bubble anyways. So even if and that it's not sustainable. So if I'm teaching my kids, so imagine, like, I'm not even actually teaching him. Remember, kids model behavior more on their parents' behavior more than their words, right? And so, like, as an example, if a parent says lying is terrible, right? I want to never catch you in a lie. But then he hears his parents lying all the time to people. What message is he going to internalize? He's going to internalize that it's okay to lie as long as you tell people that lying is bad. Like, and we have a ton of kids that will model that type of behavior. So if I'm modeling the behavior of, I'm just going to put my head down, I'm not going to engage. I'm not going to be civically engaged. I'm not going to be engaged on any level with the community that I live in. And I'm just going to go from the mosque to my house to the grocery store, and that's it. What is the kid internalizing? And then he puts himself out there, and he doesn't know how to navigate or negotiate his existence in broader society. That's why you have so many of these kids, second generation, third generation, that are confused. They're having identity issues because the parent never modeled properly how to exist in a society that might not, morally speaking, my morality is going to be very different than maybe what's more acceptable that the media portrays. Even though, like, when you actually talk to people, you'll find that morally speaking, they find it abhorrent, right?
I
But
would go as
how
far
do
as
you
to say
negotiate this?
most Americans agree with Islamic values. They just don't know it.
Oh, 100%. Did I tell you I was in Houston, right, of all cities, because we were talking about Houston earlier.
Yeah.
I was in Houston. I took an Uber, and you remember the whole passive versus active dawah. So I had no intention. I need an Uber to get from A to Z, right? We were at a function and to get back to the hotel. This is during one of the MJA conferences.
Okay.
And so I take the Uber. It was a lady, she's African American, and she's blasting some music. I don't even know who it was, right? And I was like, do you mind? It was just blasting. I was like, can you either turn it off or turn it down? And she's like, what? You don't like Nicki Minaj? And I'm like, I don't even know anything about her. I said, it has nothing to do with her. It's just that, like, so to be clear, like, I'm Muslim. We don't really listen to, this kind of stuff. Oh, why not? And I'm like, look, I believe in God. I'm assuming you believe in God, right? She's like, yeah. So, like, do you think God would be okay with somebody doing, like, selling themselves like this, half naked, doing? And she got quiet. Now she's really thinking about this. And she's like, okay. I was like, do you have a family? She's like, I have 2 daughters. I said, what, would you want that for your daughters? She's like, oh, hell no. I'm like, subhanAllah, just before she was celebrating this,
Yep.
singer. And now she's like, but hell no, it's not going to be me or my daughters or anyone else. She knows it's wrong, right? People know that it's wrong.
Mm.
It becomes almost like a circus show in the sense that we're watching all this crazy stuff and we know that all of it's wrong and we'll accept it for ourselves. Then why watch it? Why engage with it? You know what I mean? That's kind of this dichotomies. And when you talk to people, they have these family values. They want a good, she opened up, my 2 daughters, it's tough out here. I'm having to work. It was like a Saturday night. She's like, clearly I don't want to be working. I would rather be home with my kids, all these other things. She starts crying, right? We're only like
Oh my
5 minutes
goodness.
in the conversation. She's
Wow.
crying about everything. And I'm like, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Also, it was raining already in Houston. So the
Right.
roads are wet. We're on the freeway. And I just remember saying the Shahada. I'm like, La ilaha illallah, I hope we don't crash because she can't see straight. She's like reaching for tissues. She's driving. I'm like, I regret giving you da'wah. Because we're going to. So finally, like she opens up and she's like, my mom wasn't really religious and I don't like that. I wish I could go to like a church or even a mosque. And then she's like, speaking of the mosque, my daddy was Muslim and I haven't talked to him in 10 years. And I'm like, whoa.
That's
Why not? She's like, well, my parents had a nasty divorce. And I was always told by my mom that my dad was a bad person because he's Muslim. And I'm like, but have you talked to him, reached out? She's like, no. I was like, I think you should reach out to him. I don't know who he is, but I'm saying like, I think that would be a first step because I'm telling you as a Muslim, you just heard what I told you. And she's like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. You can see now she's gravitating towards us. Wallah, by the end, like was a 25-minute ride. We went through like the Shahada. I told her about everything. She was
Bro,
like,
that's a
I
short
love
ride for
everything.
Houston. I thought you'd have an hour with her at least.
No, alhamdulillah, it was 25 minutes. It wasn't, both functions were North Houston. So it wasn't like we
Nice,
weren't
nice.
driving from like downtown or something. Yeah, that would have been crazy. But yeah, subhanAllah, she's like, I invited her to the masjid. She's like, let me call my dad and find out which masjid he goes to and I'll go with him. I was like, okay,
Wow.
that's amazing. So, alhamdulillah, you never know, man.
Yeah, earlier you were talking about the concept of taqwa, and I think this is a good point to bring up. I've always heard the word explained as 3 things. So fear of Allah and hope from Allah, right? And then the third element is supposed to balance the two, fear and hope, which is love.
Uh-huh.
And first off, is that accurate? And then secondly, the way it was explained to me was that the fear isn't always necessarily from Allah's punishment, but if you truly love Allah, and this might get a little tasawwufi, but that you fear disappointing Allah by your mistakes. So it's like
Yeah.
it's almost more like the way Christians would look at God being a father and a father figure being disappointed with their kids' choices.
Uh,
Does that make sense? And can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that this idea of taqwa goes back to what you're saying with the idea of living in a bubble. And I'll ask you how, I'll set up how I think that works to get your reaction.
yeah. Yeah. No, so with taqwa, it's one of those concepts that different people will define it differently,
Mm.
right? But there's a general kind of overarching idea behind it. Like there's the definition of Ali ibn Abi Talib, Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, definitions of Umar ibn Khattab, right? Where he says, how would you find yourself if you're walking in a valley full of thorns? He says, I'm picking up my garment and I protect myself from the thorns, from the prickling. And it says that's taqwa through the whole dunya, right? That you're protecting yourself from it until you get
That's
to your
beautiful.
final destination. Right. So people, Ali ibn Abi Talib, his was like, هو الخوف من الجليل والعمل بالتنزيل والاستعداد ليوم الرحيل. It says it is fearing Allah and it is applying what the revelation has been sent down and is preparing for the day of judgment. Right. All of these are in the same boat. Essentially, they're saying the same thing. It's just different definitions. And by the way, as a rule, we have a rule in Islam from the usul that we have is that لا مشاحة في الاصطلاح. There's no quarreling over definitions.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning we shouldn't fight each other over the way that we define something because it's a different perspective. It's not a problem. Especially and this specifically applies to places where the Prophet ﷺ didn't really exactly define it, right? It's not defined exactly in the Quran. Remember, Islam is actually very flexible. The whole notion that it's rigid is kind of, you know what I mean? There's
Foreign.
only a few things that are rigid And everything else, there's the Prophet was so accommodating. Man, in Hajj, like just as an example, every single person who came to the Prophet during Hajj and asked him for a concession, he gave it. Every single person in the hadith. Every single time. Like you would think that, no, actually, technically, he said, no, that's fine. That's fine. You wanted that? That's fine. 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 Like you do everybody. It's to the point where you realize, like, it's so simple, right? And I'm saying we as Muslims, we like to make things hard on ourselves because we can't imagine that our deen is actually that simple or that straightforward. We think that religiosity lies in rigidity and in harshness.
Mhm.
And the reality is that we need to worship Allah whether it's easy or hard. That's why we fast in the winter and the summer, right?
Mm.
Because you're supposed to fast. That's why even in fasting, you're commanded to fast at a certain hour and you're commanded to break at a certain hour. You have to eat.
Mhm.
If you don't eat, now you can become sinful. So wait, I get reward for eating? Like I want to eat. That's easy. Yes, you do.
Right.
Just like you get reward for doing something hard, right? Just like in the hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ says that if you get married, right, even the act of intimacy between you and your spouse, you get rewarded for. And one of the companions says, what? I get rewarded for something that I find pleasurable and enjoyable? He says, yes, because if you did that same thing in haram, would you get sin? He said, yes. Then therefore, when you do it in something halal, you get reward. That's the beauty of Islam that I think is lost on so many people. And so we unnecessarily make things hard for ourselves. And so going back to taqwa is the idea that I'm conscious of Allah at all times, when it's easy and it's hard, right? And so a lot of times it's easy to have taqwa when I'm in the masjid, but it's hard to have taqwa when I'm the only Muslim around. That's going to be harder to have taqwa, right? It's going to be easy to have taqwa when I'm in front of my kids and my wife, right? When I'm alone, it's going to be harder to have taqwa because now it's my relationship between me and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so taqwa is remembering that the most important person to consider, and we're using person here loosely, is Allah Himself, Azza wa Jal, right? And that's the essence of taqwa, that I'm conscious, I'm aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ittaqillah haythuma kunt. Fear Allah, have the taqwa of Allah wherever you may be, right? Doesn't matter. And both of them were asking the Prophet ﷺ for advice when they were traveling. They were about to travel somewhere. So he says, yeah, you're going to go somewhere. Probably you're going to be the only Muslim there. He says, you still have to have the taqwa of Allah. You can't, you know what I mean? Just because Muslims are around. So there was, I don't know, this concept exists among Muslims, but that's not that prevalent. But I remember I was talking, and this is going to sound terrible, but I was talking to a Mormon friend. And he was like, Mormons, if they're the only Mormon, they'll pretend not to be Mormon and they'll engage in like drinking or other things, at a social event. At a company function, like they would look around like, oh, am I the only Mormon? Okay. And then he'll drink like a few beers. And I was like, what? But if there's another Mormon around, he's like, oh, Bill is over there. Dang it. Okay, I'll be a good Mormon. Because he doesn't want him to tell on him. Because you can get excommunicated. Remember, like in that church kind of environment, you'll get excommunicated, told on. Your bishop will know. You gotta be careful. But with Muslims, we don't have a congregation. We don't have membership, Habibi. Nobody, you know what I mean? And plus, we're commanded in Islam to do the exact opposite, to
Hide
cover
the faults
each
of each
other's
other. Yeah.
sins. Exactly. So if I do see him, first give him advice, talk to him, be like, hey brother, what's going on? So we gotta cover for one another,
So we're the ones that the fear mongering is we have religious police, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
But how I wanted to tie taqwa to the living in a bubble and then bring all that back
Oh
to
yes.
civic
Yeah.
is, and I'm going to personalize it to you being in Memphis here, because I feel like you laid it out perfectly. You talked about how it's difficult to have taqwa. Maybe you're alone with your devices watching TV or something on your phone, or you're in a non-Muslim environment where like Bill's hiding his beer from Bob because they're both Mormon. I get all of that. And I think that the bubble in particular, it forces us to limit the way we think, and it reinforces what you said about religiosity being strict. And I think that creates a fear of Allah because there's so much narrative out there about, like, for instance, if you're participating in a kuffar system, right? That you could be sinful for like voting and I don't think our community's there anymore. I think, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, they were really
Yeah.
worried about that. But I think there's remnants of that kind of ideology still. And it
Yeah.
confuses me because, for instance, no one or very few people are like, should I practice law in the West? Which is even more than voting, right? If you're talking about
Oh,
non-Muslim systems
100%.
and stuff.
Yeah.
Because I would make the case that our democracy in the United States is influenced by Islamic thinking.
100%.
Jefferson with the
100%.
Quran and
Yeah. Uh-huh.
the whole Renaissance of Europe coming from the Crusades after the Muslims preserved Plato and Aristotelian thought and advanced it,
Yeah.
and Ibn Rushd and
Yeah.
Imam al-Ghazali and all these people. So like
Yeah.
to me, the whole Western thing has Islamic ideology embedded in it because they took what
Yeah.
they liked and
It's a false
um,
it's a false dichotomy. Yeah.
exactly. And so where I'm coming is that I think sometimes out of maybe naivete or out of a desire for a sense of simplicity and safety, we reinforce the bubble and that limits our thinking. And then that becomes a cycle that keeps us more and more isolated. And so
Yeah.
where I plan to bring this to civics is you're in Memphis. And Elon Musk just launched a massive data center to power XAI.
Yeah.
And Memphis actually has all of these gas turbines, and there's poor black neighborhoods where the air is becoming unbreathable because of
Right.
that. And when we live in a bubble, this is a perfect example because you also mentioned Houston. There's neighborhoods in Fifth Ward where the ground has been tested to be potentially cancer causing because of chemicals and things in it. And so
Oof.
you can't breathe the air in Memphis, you can't live on the ground in certain parts in Houston. Politics is
Mhm.
interested in you whether you're interested in it or not. And I think the
Mhm.
bubble is making us uh, be what's on the table instead of being who's at the table.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, 100%. If you're not at the table, you're on the table, right? As they say. And we've removed ourselves from the table willingly by not
Right.
engaging. And I think so. Not to be a conspiracy theorist, I've done a whole research project on like conspiracy theories and all these things, but I
Mhm.
do believe that we were taught. I think a lot of these ideas were co-opted by Western. Not what. So first off, there's no dichotomy between the West and Islam, right? Because like you said, Western civilization is built on a lot of Islamic principles, whether people realize it or not, and even Muslims need to wake up to that idea.
Yes.
So there's no this dichotomy of like, Muslims versus the West. This is not true.
Mm.
Um, However, this doesn't mean that there's no conflict, but the conflict isn't what we think it is. A lot of times, us Muslims have framed the conflict wrong. So, like, we portray the world as being um, polarized between the Muslim world, the non-Muslim world, but that's not true. And we see this living in America. Why do I treat? So, I'll give you an example. Our masjid our masjid. And this is going to sound very controversial, but it's true. Our masjid in America has more freedom to speak about whatever topic we want, to do the programs that we want, than a lot of masajid in predominantly Muslim countries. So which one is the Muslim country now, right? If I'm in country X, Y, or Z, Muslim country, in order for me to give even a talk, it has to go through the religious authorities that they themselves have to be pre-approved by the political authorities, and I can't give the talk that I want. If you give a certain khutbah in a country, you could get arrested, right? Because and the khutbah isn't even that controversial. The same khutbah that I'm giving here, for example, let's say I talk about the vice of alcohol and bringing in alcohol to the country. There was a preacher. This is a true story. A preacher in a predominantly Muslim country, right? I don't want to say the country because I need to go there. They took him down. They took him off the minbar. They took him,
Mm.
like, literally, as he's saying this, he says, I don't agree with the idea that we should bring alcohol into our country. It's been alcohol free for a long time. Let's keep it this way. He got pulled down from the minbar and thrown into jail to never be
Just
heard from
Islam
again.
101. Yeah.
And this is just an example.
Yeah.
Here's the crazy part. We have plenty of dry counties in America, in Tennessee.
Yeah.
In fact, the very famous whiskey factory in Middle Tennessee is a dry county. Like when people go, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes,
People
yeah.
go and visit. People go and visit
The
that
distillery.
whiskey factory, the distillery, right, in Middle Tennessee, thinking that they can actually drink, and they tell them, nope, you're gonna have to go buy it from the county nearby because we're in a dry county. And like, wow. So in this non-Muslim country, they're banning alcohol, right, and it's completely fine. That's their freedom to do so, and but we're trying to seem progressive, and anybody speaking out against us bringing alcohol in this Muslim country gets jailed. You know what I mean? Things are flipped.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is they were never, it was never a dichotomy to begin with. The division of the world into, Dar al-Islam, Dar al-Harb, this doesn't exist. It hasn't existed for centuries,
And
It's
if
an
it did exist,
outdated
it was the
mode of
Mughal
seeing the
invasion.
world.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an outdated way of seeing the world anyways.
Mm.
And Islam, for us, the way to live as a righteous and upright Muslim is to be in the place where I can practice my Islam fine, me and my family, you know? And then if I'm given the ability to share it with other people, absolutely, because I think that this is something good for them. I'm not trying to, like, I'm not doing it for political gain, right? The idea of sharing Islam, it's because it's something good for humanity. It's something, and people see it, people know it, and this is what, Islam isn't something like different or exotic. I talk to a lot of these Christians, and I'm like, Christians are talked about in the Quran. Oh, really? So I was talking to my aunt, my aunt of all people. So this is my mother's my mother's aunt, actually. Okay, she's a converted Catholic. So she grew up Mormon. She converted to Catholicism. Don't
That
ask me
sounds
how
like
that
my
happened.
dad.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was telling her, this is like 2 weeks ago,
SubhanAllah.
Aunt Deb, and I was telling her, Aunt Deb, like Christians are talked about, and she's like, oh, really? But I said, yeah, we don't use the word Christian. And the Quran doesn't use the word Christian at all. The word Christian doesn't exist. She's like, okay, what are they called? And I was like, they're called the name that the followers of Jesus were called during his lifetime. What were they called? And this is the word that's used in the Gospels. And she's looking at me, she's confused. She's like, what's, because I said the word Christian doesn't appear in the Bible to begin with. And it's a later invention
Of
in
course.
like 120 years after the birth of Jesus. And it was a label to use the people that were worship Jesus. So it was a derogatory term in the beginning.
Mm.
So what were they called? And I said, they're Nazarenes. And she's
Mm.
like, oh, you're right. And she's like, I just got chills. And I'm like, yeah, that's what we call them. You know why we call them that? Because they never worshiped Jesus. His followers, his disciples never worshiped him. They worshiped God just like he did, right? And they followed him. They knew that he was a human being. I said, that's what we teach. That's what we're going back to. And she was like, wow, okay, you've given me a lot to think about. Just as
Ye-
good. And you can kind of tell, like, you know what I mean? I just kind of like blew her mind. And then she's like, I gotta go. She doesn't want to be further challenged. She's gonna.
One thing you should tell her, because this is one of the things that helped me become Muslim, because I was raised Catholic. I was an altar boy, the whole 9 yards. I even had
Oh,
the coolest priest. He drove a Harley, never touched me in a weird way or
wow.
looked at me funny. I had the
Alhamdulillah.
best childhood upbringing. Um, but when I started studying Islam, Catholics have a unique thing. They have their Bibles, the New American version. It has what's called the red letter in the Gospels, and that's like what you would call the ahadith of Jesus, peace be upon him.
Okay.
So when you're reading like Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, if the letters are in red in a Catholic Bible, it's what they're attributing to be what Jesus actually said. So it would be like,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
it would be like a hadith, right? And when I would read just the red letters, even in the current, New American Bible, it sounded exactly like what Islam is teaching. It's all the other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the reasons I chose Isa as my name was I wanted people to know that even though I was born Paul, who I think was like the guy who corrupted Isa's message, and in my opinion, co-opted it, and
Yes.
used it
Yes.
for
Yes.
something else.
Yes.
Uh, I wanted people to know me becoming Muslim was not turning my back on Jesus, but embracing his teaching. So that's why I
Oh,
chose
yes.
Isa. And I almost didn't want to take a Muslim name because I used to argue with the Muslims that I knew. I'm like, and it's so ironic now thinking about me being Catholic, but like back in the day, I'd be like, you have to read the Quran in Arabic to say your prayers. That's cultural imperialism. And I'm like, not even real, like you're laughing because you know about the Latin Mass, and like that. For the longest time, Christians weren't allowed to read the Bible. Latin was the language of the educated class, so that
Yeah.
the masses couldn't engage with it. It took the whole Martin Luther Reformation to change that. So, one of the things that I love that you mentioned is the false dichotomy between Islam versus the West. And I think there's another false dichotomy that I wanted to bring up as we close out the interview. And then it's because you're a Palestinian, and I mentioned in your introduction that you started memorizing Quran in Gaza City, Gaza. And
Yeah.
now that the elections are passed and that the so-called peace deal is probably going to start making the news again because the distraction is from all the other news items. Uh, can can you weigh in on? I think a lot of people try to frame what's happening in Gaza and Palestine and the genocide as a religious conflict for certain specific reasons. And I think that the way I see it, and I want you to educate me on this, is I see it as both a colonial project and I see it having religious undertones. And I think for believers, Masjid al-Aqsa is something sacred, so there is a religious element there. But to me, primarily, it's a colonial project. So can you school me a little bit and tell me where I'm wrong, maybe where?
No, you're not wrong. So is it a colonial project? Absolutely. It's land theft, it's occupation, ethnic cleansing that happened in 1948 and started before that, continues to happen now. For anybody paying attention, what Israel did to Gaza, right, in these last 2 years isn't as surprising as people might think otherwise, if you were paying attention. Meaning Israel, so one of the misconceptions that exists is that this was, so the genocide that took place in Gaza was a response to October 7th. This is false. This is not true. They always had that in the plans. And we've known this. They've said it publicly. They already knew exactly what they wanted to do. Ethnic cleansing of the Gaza Strip, destroying any semblance of life therein, expelling the whole population out, right? And we're gonna get there. I hope it doesn't get there. I hope they get stopped, but they want it. They've been pushing this. It's you know what I mean? This is the plan the entire time. This is the plan.
You're talking about the
Right, they're
Greater
using
Israel
what happened on
Project.
October 7th. Yeah, the October 7th was just an excuse. They've been waiting for an excuse. They did this, in 1982 when Israel invaded Lebanon. So this is not the first time that they invade, brutalize, kill. They invaded Lebanon in 1982. In one day during that war, they killed 500 Palestinians, Lebanese, civilian, all of them civilians, 500 people. Ronald Reagan, president at the time, gets on the phone and calls it a Holocaust. Like, he uses that word, that's the word for genocide. Okay. The genocide word wasn't as popular as it is now. He called it a Holocaust. He said, Israel, you guys you're committing a Holocaust. And he put a stop to it, by the way, back then, because he says it's making the people no longer believe that you guys are the victims here. Because remember, they sold everybody. So they came, I don't know if this has come out in recent years, through the cables, the memos, all of these, the documents that are being released, that the Israelis actually met with the Americans 7 days before the war and already showed the plan for them to invade Lebanon. And they said, do you guys already have the invasion plan ready? And they said, yes. I said, what are you waiting for? And they said, we're waiting for an excuse. And they got it 7 days later in the form of a car bombing that happened. And the reality is, and there's some people that are saying this, they probably manufactured that car bombing anyways, because they already had the plan in place. They already knew what they were going to do. It wasn't a response, then it was already the plan. So we have to kind of reframe that. So going back to your question, is it a religious conflict or not? I will tell you, it didn't start as a religious conflict. The founders of Zionism were all atheist Jews who co-opted the colonial powers that be and the colonial project for their own ethnic gain, right? Because I said Germans have Germany, French have, the France, the English have England. We need a homeland for the Jews, and we're going to build it in this land that we're going to essentially steal. And they sold, of course, the lie. Oh, there was a land without a people for a people without a land. It's a lie. It's false. And it only happened. So, by the way, they could portray that a little bit in 1948 when they ethnically cleansed 500 historic Palestinian villages, the names of which we all know, half of which no longer exist because they would literally go in and take photographs. Look, this whole village has been abandoned by its inhabitants. I wonder what happened. Well, I guess we're going to have to take over and live here now. Where actually they, through fear mongering, bombing, shelling, they massacred 22 of those villages. And so people are like, we don't want to get massacred. They had to leave and they went to neighboring villages where they thought it was safe. And of course, it didn't even prove to be safe later on anyways. So the whole thing was started. And what's crazy is that they would blame religion is an easy scapegoat. So they would blame the Middle East is a mess because it's a religious conflict. Okay. I believe, and this might sound controversial to non-believers that are watching. I believe that the solution is in religion. It didn't start. So this conflict was not started by religious people. In fact, it was started by irreligious people. Some of them used religion as an excuse. And now I believe religion is going to come in and fix the problem of these irreligious people. How so? I believe that when a believing Muslim stands up for what's right, and a believing Christian stands for what's right, and a believing Jew stands for what's right, this is how we can fix the world. This is why now you have a large number of Jews that are anti-Zionists, and they're very religious, and they understand that their texts do not approve of the killing of innocent people, the theft of their land, doing anything of the sorts. They know this. In fact, it's religious Jews that have always stand up to the Zionist Jews. Zionist Jews historically were almost always not religious. And it wasn't until World War II that religious Jews kind of got on board. And it was for a safety, not because it was actually what the religion preached, right? It was because they wanted their people to
It
be
was a
safe.
survival
And at the
mechanism.
time, 100%. And so would you blame them for then adopting Zionism? At the time, I probably wouldn't blame them for
No, of
wanting
course.
to adopt this idea because you want to protect and save your people. But we realized, like, the thing is, Zionists were working with Hitler, right? In the 1930s, they signed that document that allowed Jews to take out their wealth. Then this is before the final stages, right? Or before
Yeah.
Hitler really went crazy. But they signed those documents allowing them to go in and whatnot. So you have those people. You have, right now, Christian Zionists that unfortunately don't even know what their own Bible says. And then when you have Christians that are waking up and saying, hey, wait a second, why are we actually doing this? Why are we supporting the theft of the people's land? Why are we supporting this occupation? Why are we supporting a genocide? Like, we shouldn't be doing this. And you have more and more people waking up. Right now, we have an event coming up. The nun, Sister Agapia
Yeah. The one on Tucker Carlson's show.
Stephanopoulos. Yes,
Mhm.
she's coming to Memphis, Tennessee this Sunday.
Oh, wow.
We're gonna broadcast probably her interview and everything else that she has going on MIC's channel. But we invited her. I said, my parents met her in Washington, D.C. And they invited her because she said, yeah, I'm getting tennis. She's like, Memphis, I think I'm going to be driving through when I go to Little Rock. And my parents were like, okay, can you stop by? She's like, when? She looked at her schedule. And so while she's, going to Little Rock, on the day after, the day before, we invited her to stop by in Memphis. So she's a great voice, right? And she's Christian, she's Orthodox, she's as religious as they come. And she's clearly and there's more and more people that are waking up to that message as well. And that's why I continue to say this conflict was not started by religious people, but it's going to stop. Inshallah ta'ala, it's going to stop through the work of religious people. Inshallah.
Well, and all one has to do is have a accurate and wide-eyed view of history. I mean, even in the Holocaust museums, there's exhibits called Besa Muslims, B-E-S-A, and I want people to Google that for themselves. And it was the Muslims in, Eastern Bloc countries that smuggled Jews to Islamic lands for safety. Or the main masjid in Paris was a Moroccan guy. I forget the Imam's name, but he would give people Muslim passports, like for Hajj stamps and stuff, who were Jewish, and he would hide them just like, in the masjid, to get them
Nice.
safe passage. There's a movie about it, actually, to get them safe passage out of Europe before they would be put in
Nice.
concentration camps. And there's just on and on and on all of this history. We don't have to even go to Islamic Spain, because everyone wants to split hairs over, like how perfect the society was, when it's quite clearly a renaissance, of any pre-modern
Yeah.
society for
Yeah.
tolerance and
Yeah.
acceptance. And
Yeah.
I mean, the whole Jewish golden age was there, for philosophical and religious thought. So like, when people want to split hairs over how, minority communities were treated in Islamic Spain, it's just almost ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
Maimonides wrote why he lived in Islamic Spain. So if the golden age
Yeah.
can happen there, let's stop splitting hairs. Just stop it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
where I was going with all of that, and I hope you watched the clip that I sent you of Elon Musk talking about Memphis.
Is that in that new building off to the side?
That's in Memphis, actually.
It's in Memphis.
Yeah,
Oh, so that's where you were?
yeah.
I see.
Memphis,
Okay.
the capital of ancient Egypt.
Right. Yeah, you're bringing what?
Perhaps that's where our new God will come from.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Yeah, I wish that was funny.
Because the Christian people who are supporting Israel, they're sending red cattle from America to interbreed with Jewish cattle so they can have a slaughter of a pure red heifer to sanctify the third temple, which of course requires, destroying Masjid al-Aqsa. And that's very apocalyptic and scary and probably conspiracy theory related. But I met Governor Rick Perry when he was signing the Halal bill in Texas, right after 9/11, before the build up to the war in Iraq, or as the war in Iraq was being built up to. And he told us he was part of, and he told me this to my face as he was signing the Halal bill for Texas, which consumer protection law just means if it's halal, it's certified halal. You can't lie about it. He literally said, I have business interest in companies that are sending red cattle to Israel. And I had no idea what he was talking about. It took me years later to find out this whole destruction thing.
Wow.
But the reason I'm bringing that up is I wanted to finish off with Texas and conspiratorial thinking, so that we can kind of realize that these forces who hate our community or see us as an obstacle to their means and their ends are going to attack us. They're not going to stop obstructing Mamdani. They're not going to stop with the Islamophobia and the anti-Muslim hate. Jordan Peterson was in a conversation with Elon Musk. Did you watch the clip I sent you?
Yeah.
I'm gonna cut to it for the audience to see, and then I'll cut here and then have the response you give. But he essentially says that AI could be a new god rising out of Memphis, which used to be the capital of Egypt. And so, as a Muslim, as a believer, doesn't that just kind of really make the case that we have to be involved? We have to embrace Dawah, that we have to let people know what our message is, so that we can unite good people of different religions together for the sake of America? I mean, it feels to
100%.
me like, and I'll stop talking with this. If MAGA is Make America Great Again, it feels to me like Mamdani can make America America again. And Muslims can do that too.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. There's no inherent, so people think that there's an inherent conflict between being American and being Muslim, right? What's worse is when Muslims believe it too.
Yeah.
Okay. So non-Muslims believe it, some of them, right? But then some Muslims believe it, like that we can't, I can't be fully American and fully Muslim. And this is not true. Yes, this is not true at all. Part of being an American is actually speaking up when you see your government take a wrong turn. It's correcting ourselves. Like we wouldn't be like, it's a quintessential American quality, right? To tell the government, hey, you guys shouldn't be doing this. There's nothing more American than that, I would argue. Like there's a reason why America was one of the first colonies to break off from the British. Okay. And to say hell with you, King George, we that's a very American quality, and we continue to do it. We continue freedom of speech and holding our elected officials accountable. Huge American quality. So then when you have like the rich, so now unfortunately we're not governed. We don't have a government of the people, by the people, for the people. We have a government of the rich, the special interests, the billionaires that are trying to co-opt. Mamdani's win was definitely like kind of like get the hell out of here, billionaires. Kind of, when a billionaire is telling you who to vote for, like somebody posted, to run the other way right now. People are waking up to this idea. Elon Musk is not the savior that you think he is. If he's laughing and joking about a false god rising up from his AI that he's building, it's terrible. Even his AI, the whole he's building his AI. I don't know if people have seen Grok. It's built around characters, these anime characters that talk to you. You know what I mean? It's your companion. It's your. I'm just like, this is another level of we need to just unplug, man. I think we need to, tone down, a lot of these things. When he says that God is come out, it's not a God in the sense that it's going to give you everything that you dreamed of. It's going to be a God in the sense that people are going to be worshiping it by giving it their attention, their love, their dedication. It's going to become a new object of worship. For a lot of people, I'm scared, man. I hope so. So that's on one side. My hope, though, with these AIs, essentially they're LLMs, right? They don't come up with anything new, right? They're not creative in the sense that we know and we understand. They can only go off of everything that we have so far, meaning they're not going to come up with anything original. I think personally, and I've used everything there. I've done a bazillion things around them. I don't think it's as hyped up to what it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? It has limitations. And it's not going to be what Elon Musk envisions. We can train it to do things, but it still needs training. So I don't know. I'm an AI skeptic. It has no. I'm not saying I don't use it. It has its uses, right? It has its, but it also has limitations. It's not. It doesn't think, right? So for us to say, when we use these words, people, I think, misunderstand what it actually means. For us, knowledge, what is knowledge, right? When we put it into practice, it's something that we live. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God, created Adam and then taught him the names of everything. That's true knowledge. That's teaching. That's ingraining, because now he can think creatively and come up with something. But the AI can't come up with something brand new. There's nothing, you know what I mean? It won't come up with something that nobody has ever said or done before. It's always amalgamations of things that have been there, right? That we've fed into the system. So, yeah.
On that kind of uplifting note, can you talk a little bit about the organizations you're with, Sapiens, IERA, and where people can find you, and close it out on your Dawah class?
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. So yeah, alhamdulillah. I mean, we're trying to do, a lot of work. There's with AI specifically, this is like a shameless plug for Sheikh Fahad. So Sheikh Fahad is the head of Sapiens Institute that I recently joined. It's an institute where we try to share the message and the teachings of Islam and how they interact with modern, whether they're doubts, modern issues, things that come up. IERA is more grounds roots da'wah. We train people, da'wah, everyday encounters, and even if they want to do more active da'wah as well. Alhamdulillah, we're trying to do, we're trying to build these organizations up. Some people might be hearing about them for the first time. But we do classes around the country. If people want to invite us out, we also have our online academies where we do things online. If you couldn't tell so far, I'm a huge proponent of doing things in person, right? That experience is invaluable, especially when it comes to knowledge. So if I can be out in nature, if I can do something like a retreat, if I can be out, in the real world, that's worth everything to me. So we're trying to increase the amount of stuff that we do that's like that and get people off their devices, offline. Even though a lot of the da'wah is online, eventually true spirituality, when you think about it, if I want to get a person to sit in the masjid and go, they're not going to be on their device, right? They're going to turn it off, leave it in your car. that's when you're going to have the most spiritual impact, right? And that's some of the things that, you know, we're trying to advocate for more and more. Technology has its uses. Remember, I'm not a Luddite. I'm not trying to tell people to, but we're also telling people we can use this device for what it was intended for. It wasn't intended for endless scrolling, right? It wasn't intended for you to watch video after video after video until your mind is like, you know, it was intended to communicate. So if we can communicate with one another for what we need and then put it away and not engage with it and go and be at the masjid, be in nature, be with your neighbors, go have these experiences, I think we'll be all right at the end of the day, inshallah.
And by being nature, you mean it. I mean, you've done retreats through Moab and through, you know, like camping and white river rafting, and you've led those retreats because you're kind of a imam / mountain man, right?
I practice what I preach, brother. I go out. I've been to all these national parks, state parks. You know, we take them. I took a retreat out. We drove from Memphis, Tennessee. We went all the way to Utah, southern Utah. We camped for about 3 nights out in the desert. Brought them back to civilization. I mean, it was a 9-day trip because it took us 2 days to drive there, 2 days back. We stopped at your masjid, if you remember, in Colorado.
Yep.
And we stopped at a bunch of masajid. Middle of nowhere, Kansas, masjid. Middle of nowhere, masjid in Arkansas, you know, we're praying. And so that retreat, just to give you an example, was 3 years ago. And I know it was 3 years ago because one of the attendees, I was talking to him yesterday, and he was like, you know, our retreat was like almost 3 years ago. And he's like, yeah, he's like, my life basically changed 3 years ago. And I was like, oh, wow. He's like, no, I'm not saying this like, you know, to belittle it. He's like, I'm a different person from before that retreat to after. He's like, my life completely changed. And it wasn't anything that I did, like myself. I'm saying like just putting him, he was living in that bubble. We put him out. We showed him the big world that's out there, and he's gone. Alhamdulillah, he's gone camping. He's done other stuff since. But it's just changed. You know, we need more people to get out and about. You know what I mean? See the sun, yahi. You know, what is it? The average American doesn't even get 30 minutes of sunlight anymore. We're like, bro, we're living our lives completely indoors. We need to get out there, man. So,
well, on that note, I want to thank you for spending so much time with me this morning. I'm going to put links to Ayera Sapiens in the description below for people to be able to find you. Is there any other links I should include? Let me know offline and I'll put them there.
Inshallah.
And can you close us out with the dua?
Yes. Barakallah fikum. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from all of us, Ya Rabbil Alameen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless our brothers and sisters in Palestine, in Sudan, in Kashmir, in East Turkestan, and all over the world, wherever they're being oppressed. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help them alleviate their oppression and bring about His victory soon. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala use us for good and make us good stewards of His religion, Ya Rabbil Alameen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us, guide with us, guide through us, and cause us to be a cause for people to be guided as well, Ya Rabbil Alameen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us for our shortcomings and our sins, and reunite us with our loved ones in Jannat al-Na'im, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.
Ameen. And I'm going to add one thing. May Allah help everyone who sees this and everyone in America truly know our community and make our community one that stands for justice for all people. Because when we fight for our rights by protecting the First Amendment, we benefit every person in the shores of America. So may you all have a great day. And until next time, Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Isa. Okay. Isa? Yes. Isa Galloway.
Isa Galloway.
Isa Galloway.
Isa Galloway.
Isa Galloway, convert to Islam, defines the mission.
Kind of a show that will put people on the edge of their seat.
Because it leads to the future, the more sophisticated approach